Good evening. In central Mexico, teams of rescue workers are searching for survivors after a powerful earthquake that's claimed at least 200 lives. Dozens of buildings have collapsed, including a primary school where 21 children are known to have died. Many others are still missing. Almost half the deaths were in the densely populated capital, Mexico City, where power lines and gas pipes have been cut. The magnitude of the earthquake was measured at 7.1. The epicenter was around 75 miles south of the capital. Our correspondent Ali Makboul is there and he sent us this report.
It is today the full scale of the destruction in Mexico City has been revealed. More buildings, weakened by the frightening force of the earthquake, collapsed overnight. And this is just one of the terrifying dramas playing out here. Children trapped under rubble, confused and scared. But first one gets pulled out, and then the other. They were among the young pupils trapped when their primary school collapsed. It happened at lunchtime, moments after the earthquake struck. At least 20 children are known to have been killed here. Many more are missing. This school has become the grim symbol of Mexico's loss.
I'm desperate. I want them to get the children out. I want to see something.
This is my building.
This is the moment the earthquake hit yesterday. Those who escaped felt lucky to be alive.
I was inside the building and it collapsed. I got to the bottom and everything came around.
CCTV footage from a shopping centre showed the roof start to collapse. This woman getting out of the way just in time. And on their mobile phones, people captured countless shocking videos of buildings collapsing. Many who survived wandered around in shock. Well, it's extraordinary that even though much of Mexico City appears to be okay, you can suddenly turn a corner and find something like this, a building that used to be apartments or an office block, but where it's now been reduced to rocks and dust and where people lost their lives. But also, all over the town are also lines of volunteers, of people trying to help those who may still be alive. As we spoke, the rescue workers began to raise their hands to ask for a few minutes' silence, to try to hear any cries for help, but no joy this time. People all over this city and beyond in the rural areas affected are joining to focus their energies on saving any life they can.
We are organising with the volunteers we have, doctors, nurses, and we are working with our own materials and supplies from the people.
We need antibiotics, healing patches, wooden boards, ropes, blankets, food, medical help.
But some now sleep on the street, afraid to be inside, traumatised by the violence of the quake. There may be a spirit of togetherness here now, but there is also an acute sense of loss and of fear. Ali Makboul, BBC News in Mexico City. Well, we are very close to that school. I'm having to whisper because even though we're a couple of blocks away from the school, we're being asked again to keep quiet just in case there are any cries of any people who are trapped inside that school. The children, we know about 20 are still missing. Their families are having an agonizing wait here. We have heard just in the last hour or so that one girl has been found alive. They are managing to give her water. They're managing to give her food. But at the moment, they are still trying to rescue her. But they're silent now so they can hear the cries of any others. Sadly, any others pulled out of that rubble today have been children who have passed away. There have been good news stories in other parts of Mexico City. 26 people rescued from a building in an area I was reporting from just earlier. But for the moment, the focus is on rescuing those who are still unaccounted for, and there are many. But there is also some anger as well. Because this is an earthquake-prone zone, there are questions about why particularly schools are not earthquake-proof.
Alim, for the latest there, thank you very much. Ali Makboul, our correspondent in Mexico City. Let's stay with the story and pick up maybe on the theme that Alim was mentioning there, because Mexico is located at the heart of an earthquake zone. It suffered no fewer than 19 major earthquakes in the past century, including a devastating quake back in 1985. So why is the country so prone to these earthquakes, and what have the authorities there done to prepare people and indeed buildings, as Alim was referring to there? Our science editor David Schuchman explains.
The terrifying moment that the quake struck. This is a newsroom in Mexico City, wrecked by the tremors.
The most violent earthquake in the memory of residents of central Mexico.
Mexico is all too familiar with this kind of threat. These scenes were filmed in the 50s, and after every tragedy, there's been an effort to make buildings tough enough to cope.
This was an earthquake that struck in haphazard fashion across the...
But in 1985, another devastating quake tore down 3,000 buildings in Mexico City, killing about 10,000 people. And the government again ordered stricter controls on development. And that did make a difference. When the tremors hit yesterday, this building was among many to shake, but not to fall, using the latest designs to withstand the impact. Sadly, dozens of other places were less resilient.
The recent buildings in Mexico City should have been built to standards that would withstand this kind of shaking. It was a magnitude 7 earthquake, but it was some way away from Mexico City, and still buildings in Mexico City collapsed.
So what's behind this earthquake and why it seems so severe? Well, countries around the Pacific lie on what's called the Ring of Fire, where the geology is highly active. So Mexico has repeatedly suffered from quakes, caused yesterday by a violent shift in the rock, the Cocos tectonic plate pushing into the North American plate. And if we look at a cross-section, you can see how one of these plates is actually sliding under the other, moving at a speed of 8 centimeters a year. So massive pressures build up, and occasionally there's a sudden rupture. But making things even worse is that much of Mexico City has been built on land that's unusually soft. So any tremors from an earthquake are amplified.
Mexico City sits on this old lake bed, so soft sediments with a lot of water in them. So when the earthquake strikes it, it just goes like jelly. You get really high shaking. A lot of the buildings can't handle it and they just collapse.
So, long before this latest quake, the threat was very well known, and for years there has been the technology to keep buildings safe. The problem is making sure the rules are applied everywhere, and investigators will want to know what went wrong. Were corners cut in construction, leading to such terrible losses? David Schuchman, BBC News.
Mark Sampson.